Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for an artist talk today. I'm Donna Merkt, and I'm the Director of Museum Experience at the Gaylord-Pickens Museum, home of the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. And I am so delighted tonight to be able to be welcomed into your homes and as we welcome you into our museum gallery to get to hear the story of two very special people. So we are hearing the stories tonight of artists Barbara S. Scott and David Holland, who are together exhibiting in this lovely exhibit called Earth to Sky. So I'm just gonna navigate here. So here's a great photo of David and Barbara, and they have been great friends for some time. Both of these Oklahoma artists are making quite the stir in the art scene, and in part they've done that because they have worked toward that together. So it was really important to them when we did this exhibit to be able to share that story and to show that connection with the art. And so they're here to tell you more about that story. And so I would like for you to meet David and Barbara. Thanks so much for being here tonight, guys.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Good to be here.
So we are just going to go ahead and get started. And I know that you two had some questions that you kind of wanted to put to each other. So if you'd like to, you can go ahead and share how you got started together.
Well, initially, we just met randomly doing a summer job at a local garden center. And through the course of getting to know each other through that summer, we realized that we were each working on our art in our own little spaces. And so that was the beginning. It has continued this partnership until now. So I think it'd be nice if David started with how his journey began.
Yeah, so I started in art really as a little kid. I liked to make things or do things and with my hands especially. And I think my folks kind of picked up on that a little bit. So growing up, one thing they did was help me paint my pepper kits, which sounds really funny, but they're pretty effective because within a few minutes, the little kid can just pull out little things and make something that's really kind of impressive, So that's how I probably got the idea that art was a thing, really, to do. And so when I eventually ended up in Oklahoma, I decided to get into doing stained glass and did that for a long time and wanted to kind of make that a profession. So I decided to go to art school in OCU and studied art and studied a lot of different mediums to try to figure out which one would be good for me. Watercolors and oil painting and screen printing and all these things to get my feet wet and see what I liked. So my favorite things to do were probably pencil, and then I got into what back then was called cray pot, which was almost like a oil stick, but it was kind of hard. So it's almost like what I now call the Modern Life series, and there are sort of little parables or vignettes or little storylines that I ever kind of thought up to go along with the thought that I had. So the images that are shown on the screen say, for instance, the one of the woman who was juggling clocks. So that was precipitated by something my mother said to me, that women do that a lot. They juggle time. So that really resonated with me. So I tried to figure out a way I could represent that literally, on paper that would be engaging. And so she's literally juggling time, juggling clocks, and then she's also burning the candle at both ends. So, and then they also form, those could be tears or drops coming down.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, sure thing. So the Modern Life series was really important to me because it was an expression of an actual thought in art, that I created from scratch. So I really liked that idea. So I did those for quite a while. I had a major show at a major gallery of like 30 pieces. And so that was my big opportunity, to make a big show and everything. And so 2 pieces out of those 30 pieces sold, which to someone may sound great, Van Gogh never sold a piece in his life, so selling 2 was okay, right? Well, that was crushing to me. So that led to this crisis of confidence that I had, where, my objective has always been to make a living making art. So I realized that I'd kind of gone down the dead end path, really, because unless that art sold, I wouldn't be able to make my living at art and do art all day long, which is what I want to do. So not too long after that, I went to an OVAC seminar, Creative Capital, and they sort of taught me a lot of things about art, and it kind of forced me to make a decision of what to do. And so my decision was between clouds or flowers, and I decided on clouds for a couple of reasons. One, clouds represent themselves. You don't have to say, hey, this is a cloud. It looks like a cloud, and it is a cloud. So there's no explanation. So what I really like about it is the ability to express the beauty of those clouds and get people engaged in the beauty of the clouds.
And especially living in Oklahoma where you just.
Yeah, it's the perfect place, really.
Right.
Yeah. So I made that transition, and so now that's really my focus, and that has opened so many doors for me as an artist, just having a single focus, really, because, especially for me, because I am in Oklahoma, it's a perfect place for cloudscapes, that I have an automatic audience almost, because they know this stuff, having to explain it, and they can see the beauty in it as well. So Barbara, can you tell me a little bit about about your path? I know after we met, I knew one thing that I have seen you doing was painting on pots, broken pots.
Before that, it was the drawings.
Okay, so tell me about the drawings.
Well, I took a much more surface route than you did.
Yes.
I had loved drawing as a girl, but obviously I was at 15. I was hit for the first time by depression and didn't know what it was. I knew something was wrong. Didn't know how to say, didn't know how to tell. So just kind of lived with that for a couple of years and then wanted to escape that misery. So I just became a geographical drawer. I just was trying to escape from those feelings. So I hitchhiked out to California. I would never do that again. And in the course of the next few years, ended up taking packed mule trains down to the Rio Grande Gorge for trail maintenance. Ended up in Gloucester, Massachusetts doing offshore fishing. Then ended up 10 miles south of the Canadian border farming for about 7 years. But I was never able to escape that darkness. And eventually ended up hospitalized for severe depression. And that was up in Minnesota, like around the Mayo Clinic. And my family was back here. And between the time when I was up there and got sent back here, I wasn't able to speak. I couldn't speak, I couldn't find the words for anything, I didn't know what to say. So I started drawing.
Okay, that's your expression.
Yes, that was the only way I could express what I didn't have words for. And these were dark drawings, as you can see on the board. The one in basically the black and white, I considered myself portrait, haunted by the past. there are all these figures, and all those figures have hidden meanings that I couldn't escape from, and I just felt tied to them in an island, all alone. And then the one on with the broken vessels and the figures, that was called Broken Vessels, because I felt like we were all broken vessels trapped in our own tears. And the others, you can show kind of the torment, that the very thing that you want is the thing that will hurt you, people leaving, all that. So those drawings were very intense, and it got to where I wasn't eating or sleeping doing them, so I became afraid of drawing. So I did nothing for a year or so. But then that was when we started working at the garden center. And back in the potting shed, I could see all these broken terracotta pots. And I loved their form and their shadows.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, a safe way to talk with my hands would be to paint on these pot shards. And I just painted moments. I wasn't able to get images up of those, but was able to just paint moments on those in acrylics. And I started craving more form. Actually started craving more form, so I started doing found objects to make sculptures. And then had this idea for a piece that ended up being 7.5 feet tall. And I realized I could no longer wait for the found piece of wood to make this.
So how did you come up with the idea for something 7 foot tall?
I had found this beautiful vertebrae on a height that I think might have been a bison or something like that.
Yeah.
And to fit it,
Where did you find that?
I think it was up around Bartlesville. And to do the beautiful sketch that I wanted, it was called Earthborn Starbound. It was going to be at 7.5 foot scale. So I never wanted to go back to the darkness, even though I will never be able to forget from the past, or just knowing what we all go through now, that there are sorrows, there are pains, there are tragedies, along with their joys. So my work, I wanted to make, to express those, but never darkly, more like with an acknowledgement of the nobility and strength of the human spirit, to keep getting up every day and trying again, and trying to make something beautiful and loving out of our lives.
The work's very uplifting. I mean, everything has wings on it, or something going up, or a bird getting out of a page. So is that seems like a thing to you?
Yes, like I said, I don't want it to be just dark and ugly, because I admire everyone for getting up, and everybody's got things they're dealing with, be it from the world or from within themselves. And we're all overcoming something, facing something. And yet, everybody is doing it. And a lot of people don't know the stories going on inside. But everyone has this courage to just start a new day. Tomorrow will be better. Let's make something beautiful out of the time we have.
Yeah, also, your ideas, I've known you for a long time, so I know your ideas come from all sorts of different places and things. But sometimes I'd like for you to tell the story about the piece you saw where you saw something upside down, and that triggered in your mind.
Well, again, I'm not like David. I don't get to have tangible objects to show the beauty of, because my goal is just to express something about the human spirit and the emotions. And so I pretty much have to wait for an idea to come. And sometimes it's a phrase, sometimes it's a shadow on a wall, sometimes I'll have a title but no image, or vice versa. And one day, not long after my dad died, I had this phrase come through my mind, because I didn't know how to cope. So this phrase came through my mind: today I'll just be quiet and listen to the birds sing. But I didn't know the image to go with it. And there was a children's book sitting on the floor in front of me, upside down. So I received positive spaces, negative space, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I saw the negative space, and I thought, that is exactly the figure that I want. So the form can come. So like I said, you look at things upside down, shadows out of the corner of your eye, and just.
It was fascinating that you were able to make that connection.
It was like it had just been waiting for me. I saw that,
Yeah.
it was just like that, oh my gosh, that's it.
Yeah.
And from then I could begin the design.
Yeah.
Then I could begin the design. And you were from photographs?
I mostly work from photographs. Yeah, I watch, growing up in Oklahoma, I've always been fascinated by the weather. And you kind of, you are aware of the weather because you need to be aware of the weather in Oklahoma. So, I always used to watch lightning storms and stuff and was fascinated by them. So, what did you ask me?
Okay, you guys, I thought you might, you had told me you wanted to share a little bit about OVAC.
Oh, yeah.
And so we know how important that they were to your development as artists. Do you want to talk on that just a moment?
David, you began with them first.
I had some early exposure with OVAC. I actually knew John Meese, who was the gentleman who founded it. And his objective was to literally get money into the hands of artists so that they could do what they do, which is art. So, I've been associated with that for a long, long time. And then, I had this crisis of confidence that I was telling you about, and through an OVAC was a retreat that I went to called Creative Capital. Was a weekend where you literally learned every single thing that a professional artist could possibly need to know. Taxes, or making a portfolio, making contacts, how to talk to a gallery, all that stuff. And we did role playing, I remember doing one thing where it was role playing about someone else was playing the gallery owner and I was playing the artist. I was calling the gallery owner to ask them if they would look at my portfolio or something. And so that role playing helped. But the Creative Capital seminar really put, for me, the idea that I could make a living at art. It really gave me the foundation that I needed. I don't know, it just lit my fire, literally, really, to think that I could really actually make a living at art and make that my focus. And so I think that is also one thing that precipitated my choice in going with storms and clouds, especially living here in Oklahoma. Like I say, I knew I had an audience, so I knew that I could be fairly successful if my images were successful. So it was kind of a natural choice, and it was something that I loved to do. And that, so when I was trying to make that decision of what I wanted to paint, flowers or clouds, it had to be something I love, and both of those two were things that I love. In fact, in the show, I have a picture of a flower that I grew in my garden. But clouds have always been fascinating to me, and I can just watch them endlessly. So they, that really helped me recognize that I could make a business literally out of making my art. So it was hugely beneficial to me after that. And then, I applied for some OVAC grants also to get things that I needed, like a new camera. And that's one nice thing about OVAC is that they help support artists in that way. If they have a financial burden of some sort and they need help getting a camera or whatever they need to show somewhere, and OVAC helps them do that. So it's been hugely beneficial to me in my career.
Well, you turned me on to OVAC, and since I did not consider this being my profession, it was just an urge to express and connect with other people.
Yeah.
OVAC was my first introduction to, you have to have a business statement, you have to have a resume, you have to have good images. And so again, you led me into that, and that gave me kind of the structural bone work to be able to take the work to the public, because mine is very personal. And what I love the most is the personal connections I make to individuals who are moved by my work. And some of the stories I have heard from them make me feel like they're my brothers and sisters. They have told me such personal stories that mean so much to me. And that has been the richness that I've gotten out of it. It's been for my survival to make it, and I've been so enriched. OVAC also, it led us into the whole community of local artists, which I would have had no access to. I was very much alone, didn't know about anything on that scene, and so just getting to know our fellow artists is incredible. We have a great community of people, so supportive and diverse.
Just out of curiosity, was it OVAC that encouraged you guys to take your trip to Santa Fe that you told me about?
I don't think so.
You know, we have prepared us for that. I
Yeah.
don't know that it's what convinced us to that. I think we had a friend that used to live in the city, Michael Freed, that worked at a gallery out in Santa Fe. And I think that was our first contact with knowing that Santa Fe was a thing. That was our market. And we learned from him that it was like the second or the third largest art market in the United States. So that's pretty significant to have within a 9-hour drive, a capital of art that we could go to and theoretically try to find a gallery, which was our next quest.
We had so much fun. We must have made like 7 or 8 trips.
Yeah.
I marvel, at least for me, I marvel at my innocence, not knowing what a big deal that was, you know. But again, there we went the off season, as had been suggested to us, when the gallery owners aren't busy, and they all spoke with us. We ended up with dinner with some of them.
Yeah.
Dave and I got to share so many memories. We learned so much, and at that time, we each did get into a gallery in Santa Fe. It was an incredible life bonding experience for both of us. And all that did prepare us for that, because we had to be prepared.
And it was really good to have that person who had worked in a gallery before too.
Yeah.
Because he was really beneficial to both of us. He told the story about, I think, the art business as like a ball game. So there's different levels of ball games. You know, you can be in the minor leagues, or you can be in the sandlot, or you can be in the major leagues, or whatever. So with each level of expertise that you have, there are rules of the game. And so if you know the rules of the game, it's a little easier to play the game. You know? So Michael told us some of the rules of the game, like you don't go when the gallery is super busy, which led to us going in January. And he told us that you need to make a super beautiful portfolio that represents you. You know? So
I think another thing that taught me, and I think a lot of other artists in the community can relate, along that game, there are different games to play.
right.
They each have there's galleries, there's museums, there's your personal enjoyment, there's independent artists, there's public art, there's festival art. They each have their advantages, they each have their disadvantages. There are rules you have to play with each, and if you pick this game, then you don't get all the benefits of that game, and vice versa. But I think it was such a personal comfort to me to realize, okay, this is me. I have my strengths, I have my limits. This is I have to take this path, be content with this more individual, personal path as opposed to a commercial path, because that's who I am, and that's fine. It has its rules, I can accept those. It has benefits, I can accept those. It won't be a mass audience, maybe like some artists receive, but this is my path. And Michael really explained that to me and gave me a lot of comfort by understanding that.
And that's one thing I really admire about you, is you really found your place, or you found a way to present your art to people who it affects deeply. And so, it's really, each artist does have to find their own path, really, and yours is a little connection that you pour so much of your emotion and everything into the work. People who see it can see that immediately, and there's always a person who, the message that you were trying to get across.
See, that's it. And so that's like where you have, it just brings tears to my eyes. You have this kinship, because these are common feelings. These are common feelings. People who see them differently, but to hear their connection to it is amazing. And I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, you have some amazing stories about
The individuals
Well,
I would
it's
never
funny,
forget.
just the coincidences of
Yes.
things that, and also there's really a lot of, the way that you got the materials for Earthbound Star.
Earthborn Starfound.
Yes. Just getting the wood, there's a story behind that. So
Well, that was my first intentional piece, because I usually had to go out and buy wood, crawling up into the bins at Forest Lumber.
yeah, I remember hauling these huge.
Yes, you needed David's pickup. David's enormous. I think David's pickup can move anything upon. But through the course of that, again, I met a person who helped me, and then another person who helped me, and another person who helped me, and another person who helped me, to where by the end of that piece, I wrote a whole story of the wonder of everybody who had been there at the right time with their kindness and generosity to help me. And I printed them out and gave each person a copy of that story. And that was what I would consider my first major piece. And it's now in the permanent collection at the OSU Museum of Art. So that is I want that to be my new self-portrait.
Well, Barbara, I think you were wanting to ask David about, where his ideas come from.
Yes, yeah. Can you extrapolate more on like which cloudscapes you choose, or?
Yeah, it's much more a process to me. I don't have this revelation of, I think I'm going to make a about this today. So when I watch the weather, I kind of know when the storms are coming and the situation behind them. So there's an ideal situation for me, and that's a cold front coming through, and so there's clear air in that cold air. As that comes through, then it produces all the thunderstorms. And if those keep going, then they're far enough away that I can start taking pictures of them, because I like seeing the entire storm. I like seeing the whole structure of the storm, kind of what the dynamics of the storm.
Because you're realistic.
Yeah,
this is a real storm.
All about realism. They're really pretty accurate representations of the photos that I use. Really. So usually when I'm out taking pictures of storms, so I watch the weather, I wait till the storm goes through, and then I usually get out there and I like it so that the sun is behind me, and then I'll take pictures of the storm. And then, I'll take anywhere from 2 to 400, really, depending on how long I'm out there. There's sometimes when there's this amazing thing that just keeps going and going and going, and I usually like to capture it all the way through sunset too, because that's when you get those gorgeous colors, the beautiful lawns and hot gentle pinks and just gorgeous stuff. So after I take all my photos, then I go back and download them on my computer, and I'm able to look at all those individual photos together and remember what I was seeing, and then I start looking at the individual photos to see what looks dynamic to my eye. And you can kind of tell, even when you have, say, 50 images on your screen of the little images, you can kind of pick out, oh, wow, that one must be good. And so, click on that, so that's really nice. So it's a real process of elimination so that I get the most, so whatever storm I'm depicting, I get the most dynamic stage of development of that storm. So it looks like it's in motion almost. It's almost captured in motion, like it's frozen in time. So that's kind of how I pick out the images that I want to use. And then after I figure out one that I want to use, a lot of times the cloud is like fantastic, right? But in the foreground, there's a shopping mall or something else. So I'm rarely able to use both the foreground and the cloudscape from the photos that I use. So then I have to figure out a landscape that will, to me, not take, I don't want the landscape, it's all about the cloud to me. So I don't want the landscape to take away from the cloud. I want the cloud to be what gets the impact. So I usually go for landscapes that are understated. And,
well, again, the landscape, even a little bit of landscaping really helps give scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the immensity of the clouds.
Right. And that was a really major adjustment for me, because when I really first started out cloudscapes, it was just a cloud itself and then a real thin black line for the border. I think you probably remember that.
Yes.
And so people would tell me that I love the cloud, but I really can't tell how big it is. And so that was really an interesting development. It really helped me along too, because it gives the scene
a lot of power.
Yeah, it makes power. Yeah.
Like you see the scale of the trees to the height of it. Yeah.
Yeah, David, would you like to talk about that piece just a little bit? We have it up on the screen for our viewers.
Yeah. So this is called the shadow of water, because, and I'll kind of explain a little bit of my thinking of why I do what I do. So water is such an essential part of our lives. We literally would not be here without water. Water, being on the earth is what caused life to happen, So, and we need water every day to survive. And so water is like critically important for everyone. So this is a representation of water. And so the shadow of water is really on all of us. So, you know, in other words, it's so big that without water, we cannot exist. So that's why it's called the shadow of water. This particular storm was a really good friend of mine, loves taking pictures of clouds just as much as I do. Her name's Arlene Speroni, and she took this, she took like a whole series of photographs that had these gorgeous, beautiful colors in it. And I just loved them so much that she offered to me, you know, that I could paint from them. So I took one of her pictures, and that's what the cloudscape in this is. And so to match that, I had to figure out, it has to be the same time of day, the light has to be accurate to the storm. But once again, I didn't want the foreground to take away from the cloud. And so I made several trips to the Cimarron River late in the evening to take pictures of the river. There were no clouds, unfortunately. But I took lots of pictures of the river itself, reflections in the river, late in the evening about this time. So I had a really perfect photograph of the Cimarron River that I was able to put in this foreground and, kind of enhance a few parts color-wise, not really, you know, I really represented pretty much what I see both in the cloud and in the landscape. They're just paired because I can't really imagine usually in a photograph so that's kind of the story behind that. And the thing I love about this the most is the contrast, and that's why I like sunset storms the most too, is because you get that contrast from, they're so tall that the very top of them is being hit by the sun, and it can be like stark white. And then the bottom of them can be in shadow, the shadow of the earth at that point, even still, because they're like, you know,
And that gives them so much depth too.
yeah,
When you
it
get
does.
the color.
Yeah, absolutely, the contrast. Yeah, and so that's what I really like about this, is all the layers of contrast that go back in the distance, and the yellow, purple contrast too really helps me.
So David, we've got a couple of other pieces of yours that can be available for you to discuss. Would you like to talk about Eclipse Witness?
Oh, yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
So we have kind of the comparison with the photograph. So let me get that up on the screen.
Okay.
And your process photos, and then we have a big one also.
Okay. Yeah. So the two photographs that you see, the one on the far right, I think it would be, is the palest one, and that's the actual literal photograph that I took when I was there. So where there was in Omaha. I mean, not in Omaha. So let me tell you a little bit about the background story. So the total eclipse of the sun, which I had never witnessed in my life, I was incredibly excited to go see. My brother lives in Omaha, Nebraska, which is fairly close to where the eclipse was going to be. So I drove up there, spent the night with him, and then got up at 3 in the morning and drove probably, I don't know, 400 miles to the west to where there were going to be no clouds in the sky, so that I could see and experience the eclipse without clouds. So I got there, and it's really interesting, there were no clouds directly above me, but there were clouds, kind of different kinds of clouds around me. And to the north of me, there was a thunderstorm that was approaching from the north. So I thought that was just, it could not have been more perfect, because, you know, I'm a cloud guy. The reason why I went to take pictures of the eclipse wasn't really to take pictures of the eclipse itself. It was to take pictures of the atmospheric phenomenon that happens when you're in eclipse. And so if you look at the horizon when you're in an eclipse, the horizon turns these amazing array of colors. It's like this little teeny rainbow on the horizon. And so I was at the eclipse, went through all that. I took a whole bunch of panoramic shots. I just went 360 with my camera and took panoramic shots of the horizon all the way around. I've done several paintings from those as well. But this particular photo was taken after the shadow had left me, but it was still within part of the shadow of the eclipse. So the way that the cloud was lit was really, really unusual. So if you see the larger picture in the center there, it shows, so I enhanced it, I used contrast so that I could actually see the dimension of the cloud and where the cloud tops were. And they were just so perfectly lined up. And the odd thing about them, though, if you look at each bump, as it were, so like each cell that's rising up, each one of those has dark on all the way around the top of it. So you can see the shadow, it's really literally the reflection of the shadow of the eclipse on this cloud. So that's what fascinated me about it. And plus, it was a really cool looking cloud because it had all this dimension. So, I've done several pictures of the eclipse horizon, but this was the only one that I've done really literally of a cloud that was affected by an eclipse. And so it's called eclipse witness because literally that cloud witnessed eclipse.
And this piece is placed in the show in a way that you really appreciate also. So
Yeah.
let's show that as one of the ways that we tried to combine your work and Barbara's and show you guys kind of the relationship and how you supported each other in the friendship there. So this is Barbara's On the Verge of Unknown Skies. And then if you get in just the right place on the gallery, you can see David's eclipse witness.
And we give credit to Donna for that. Donna set up this show. And when we came to view it, already mounted, she went through everything and showed us echoes, patterns, similarities, colors that we had never noticed between the work. And she found ways to put them together. And this is one of the very best that people notice.
Well, it's easy to do when you have good material to work with and when you have friends that have influenced and supported each other for as long as you have. That's
Yes.
there whether you know it or not. So David, we have one last piece of yours that you wanted to talk about today, the gravity of souls.
Yeah, that's so. I told you about not putting horizons or making the focus the cloud itself, and so this is that. So after a while, I just said, screw the landscape. I'm just going to make the cloud, and so I tried to pick the most dynamic kind of cloudscape that I could find, and that's what this one was. It had so many layers and so many different kind of textures to the clouds and different colors. So I did several studies, which this is one of, because I wanted to do a really, really large painting. I ended up doing a 72 by 60 painting that this was a study for. This is a 30 by 40, which is actually pretty big for me. But it's also freeing in a way because working big, your brush strokes become a little freer. You don't have to worry about tight, super tight detail. So this piece was the second color study that I did for that larger piece. The first one ended up much more gray tones, so much more muted. Wasn't quite as dynamic. So this one, I really wanted to make some sort of bold color decisions. So these colors do exist in the photograph pretty much, but I really enhanced them a lot in this particular image because it really kind of adds to the dynamism of the painting itself.
And that's kind of how you can put your individual stamp on a real storm.
Yeah. I think the color, that's the thing that really draws me to a particular image. Usually is the color, and I do like to kind of bump it up a little bit, so it does have an emotional effect as well as a visual effect.
So I fibbed a little. This is the last cloudscape for you to talk about. But we wanted to talk a little bit about how you're exploring other things now. So why don't you talk to us about your new series of flowers?
Okay. So I'm a major gardener. I've got a huge 50-foot wide backyard that's nothing but perennial garden, really. And so this particular flower is one that I grow. It's a tree peony. It's a flower that I absolutely love. It's like the highlight of the spring every year. The flowers get anywhere from 8 to 10 inches across, and they're silky and just so beautiful and yummy. So I remember telling you about having the conflict between big flowers and big flowers. And so now that I've kind of established myself, I can kind of relax a little and do something for fun for myself. And so that's one reason why I did this. I first started out by doing this particular image was a 12 by 12, I think 3 years ago. And this was a really unusually lit scene. So I love these flowers so much that even when it gets dark outside, I'll take a flashlight out and go look at them. So this one day, I thought I would go ahead and take photographs of that, of the flower being lit by a flashlight at night, which gives these really kind of ethereal, kind of spooky kind of vibes to it, I think. But it also enhances the depth a whole lot and makes it, that seem a lot more alive. So that's kind of the story behind that. But what I really love about it is the deepness of it. That's what so one thing that a lot of people don't know about me is I'm three-dimensionally sight challenged. So I can only see out of one eye. So depicting three-dimensionality in my paintings is really important to me because that's what I crave, right? That three-dimensionality, because when you have one eye, you see in 2 dimensions. Which, in a way, that happened in art school when I lost that sight. So I had to kind of learn how to re-see. But it's kind of nice that I was in art school at the time because I had to make that adjustment immediately. So I think that that's one reason why there's so much contrast in my work and so much contrast with either color or light, because I crave that three-dimensionality. And this particular flower, I think, achieves that. So I really enjoy doing it. And I plan to do more in the future as well, especially of tree peonies, which is what this flower is. So I grow those, and they're really an ancient species, but they're just spectacular, and they grow on woody stalks that some of mine are now probably around 50 inches tall. So you get this humongous flower on top of this beautiful bush that's this high. So anyway, I love them a lot.
And finally, did you want to tell us a little bit about you're a traditional studio painter, and now you're exploring painting in plein air?
Yeah, a lot of painters suggested to me that I try to paint in plein air because it does a lot for an artist. It speeds up, when you're doing plein air, you really have about 2 hours to paint whatever scene you're working on because the light changes and the shadows change, and you have to capture parts of it as that's happening. So you kind of have to just make decisions super quickly. So that's one advantage to doing plein air is it speeds up your thought process. But it also enables you to see real color and try to depict real color on the canvas. So I've taken that up, and I'm really not very good at it. I'm super detail oriented, and it takes me months to do a painting. So doing one in 2 hours is not my forte, but it's a really super pleasurable experience just being out there doing what I love to do in nature. And usually I'm always painting something I love to look at. So what could be better than that? So I really love doing that, and I kind of am planning. I usually do a trip to Colorado to see the aspen every year, but this year I've heard that there's a lot of smoke in the air, from the forest fires, and also because of COVID, I don't think I'm going to be traveling much. So my plan is to kind of do some local sites and try to jump back into doing something there. See how that goes.
We look forward to seeing what you produce.
Thanks.
And speaking of producing, Barbara, I think let's look at a few of your pieces and see how. So we'll start with the one that's actually kind of behind you there. So let me bring that up on the screen and tell us a little bit more about Prayer of a Heart.
Yes, well, sometimes you will often, especially on Facebook, you see what so many people are going through, and your heart just wants to say a prayer for them. You would love to free them from any sorrows or pain, set them free, wish them only good things. And I thought, when a heart wants to reach out to someone, the way that we as humans do it is with our hands. To me, in a lot of my works, hands are kind of the human element that bridges the gap. And this was, so that's a cage that closes, and that bird is being set free to fly where it wants. And like I said, I have no training in art and never learned how to use a hammer, a saw, drill a hole. So for me, the idea comes, and I just have to have a tenacity to solve each puzzle as it comes on how to make things stand up, because in sculpture, you can't draw the floating line. Things have four sides. They actually have to stand up straight. They have to fit. They have to be sturdy. But there is so much personally, as well as artistically, I've learned from doing that, because you have to start with the thought, I know there's a way I can make this work. And I've had to tell myself, just start with one thing that you know. Is it just a thumbnail? If it's is it a thumbnail? Is it the palm? Just begin. And again, because it's sculpture, it all eventually comes around and works. So it's a lesson in faith to me, to do a piece, in tenacity. I never know what it's going to really look out when it's done. So no one is more surprised and overjoyed to see a finished piece like this, and to be able to experiment with color and form and just figure out the engineering puzzles. And when I'm done with a piece like that, I just look at it as though its life is all its own, and I was just there to watch it happen. So sometimes it's a struggle, sometimes you wrestle with the piece, and sometimes you're just flowing together. So it's each piece, and I have very personal stories together.
Well, speaking of hands being the kind of the human element, we'll look at another work here that gives us a close-up of that hand.
Oh, see, I look at that and go, I do not know how I did that. I don't know why. I love that hand. It was very small. Again, you just have to start. And my thought on this, I just love that little hand, was this is called a ladder of success. And so many of us, I think, wrestle within our hearts about how to accept what we consider success as opposed to what the definition is. So with this, the ladder, which is normally 2 straight rungs up, kind of the traditional method, I had just symbolized by the straight, dark, wooden upright. And then there was the more human second side that has a little more curve to it, a little more bend, a little more whimsy. It's stretching the boundaries. And to allow ourselves to know that for some of us, sometimes success is something just holding a delicate butterfly in our fingertip. Sometimes just finding wonder and peace is what we should call our success. So yes, that's one of my favorites.
And you particularly like it in the gallery as well. So let's look at a shot there.
Oh, your placement of this was marvelous. Donna saw in this the similarities between David's cloud of this ladder as the horizontal rungs and the horizontal layers of the cloud itself. But to me, what I saw, it just still kind of chokes me up, as I saw this little delicate hand with this little butterfly, willing and able to face into that oncoming storm. So that's one of my favorite pairings that she did.
Thank you. I like this one too.
To me, it's very powerful, and I think that's sometimes how we have to live.
Face the storm.
Just facing into the storm.
That's very appropriate for Oklahomans, isn't it?
Indeed. And for the times we live in.
So you've kind of grown in what you've been doing too, and been experimenting with kind of a new aspect to your media, relief sculpture.
Yes, I started thinking, if I did, I call this sculptural wall hangings, there would be a little more latitude in different styles, techniques. I could tell more narrative story, because not everything does have to be freestanding. And not everything has to be in real proportion. So this, to me, I call this Chrysalis. So this was the great city behind, the woman trying to literally, physically, with the face and the arm, that are three-dimensional, emerging from that gray background, gaining her true colors, and being able to send herself off into a sky of another world. So I really come to enjoy the freedom that some of the sculptural wall hangings permit. And again, it's amazing on bas relief. This is a little more than, I guess, just bas relief, but it's very different because here you don't have four sides, but you give the impression that it does. So that one had a lot of experimental techniques that I'd never used before, and I was very pleased with the outcome.
The face on it is just.
I have no idea how I did that face.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, because that is so small, and wood does not lend us. Wood is a subtractive material, which makes it totally different from clay or paint.
Yep.
You take off one wrong thing on wood and you're done.
Yeah.
You can't put it back on. And a straight-on face also has to have symmetry to it. So even if you surprise yourself and manage to get one half of the face the way you would like it, then you go, uh-oh, now I have to do the other side to look the same. So some of these things do very much seem to me like they do not come from my hands. And I'm just grateful that I was able to be a part of it.
And it's just the expression of the
Yes,
peacefulness
to
on
be
the
at
face is
peace.
just amazing. With that,
Yes.
how that it came out like that. It's done.
Yes, and nothing can be done twice. You know, every piece is totally unique, and I could never repeat any of them. So yes, I love the expression on the face.
So let's look here at your most recent work that's in the exhibit.
This little piece, I don't know why, it's seemingly so simple, but I just think it's beautiful. And the way it came to me was unlike most of any other piece ever has. I was watching, there was all this turmoil going on in the world this spring in many different ways. So perhaps that was the atmosphere that my mind was in. But I happened to be watching this an old black and white movie. And within that movie, there was just one little shot of someone carrying through the room just this ancient oil lamp. And I saw that, and immediately I thought, the flame fed by tears, justice, the flame fed by tears. And that image and that title came to my mind in a split second, and I was ecstatic. And then it's just left up to me to try to figure out how to do it. It's my hands that are behind my mind. But again, I am very pleased with the way it turned out. I had to do shaping in ways I hadn't before. And went the extra step of putting the gold leaf on that flame of justice, because it is so rich and so full of life. So justice, the flame fed by tears, where we all find justice.
I wanted to share with you, Barbara, that we have a friend of yours in the chat who says that she has an older piece of your work. Jill is joining us, and that she absolutely loves to see how you've progressed and have learned more about your work, and that hearing this helps her enjoy your work even more.
Jill!
And that you're inspired by and Jill is inspired by the challenges that both artists live with, and yet move forward to create beauty and insight and delight. So we just want to say thank you, Jill, for sharing that so much. And then Barbara, your last piece that we have out today is one that you said you had some particular challenges with because it was kind of a new situation for you.
Yes, well, again, you get these ideas and you have no idea how to do them, but you begin anyway. And I just had this image, like almost like you watch clouds and you see images in it, and the bird was perfect for that. But I had always wanted to try to incorporate some clear blue glass against white, because I just think that's such a bright, pure, refreshing combination. but I didn't know how to get glass in between, in the middle of a single piece of wood. So managed to just have a little Dremel router and managed to figure out you had to cut two pieces exactly the same, lay them open, route out the same shape for the glass in each, then be able to totally line them up, then put in the glass, line them up, glue them together, and then finish shaping them. So that's another one of the challenges I always face in any piece. There's so much thought that I have to put into what step do I do first. Because if I do the wrong step first, then I can't get to the next step. So there's a lot of pacing and pondering, and it's a joy when it comes together. And the upright in that part of the curve is aluminum. And again, it is also wedged in between two pieces of wood for like the mountains that it's rising out of. So that was, every piece usually calls for some new technique or experiment that I've not yet done. And I just tell myself, surely there's a way I can figure this out.
So you guys have been friends for a long time, and I just wondered if there were any final thoughts that you'd like to share about your celebration of your journey and of your years together and of your support together.
We wanted this whole show be a celebration of our friendship through these years, all we've overcome through them, of our great community, and what I think is the marvel of the work itself that tells each of our own stories. David has been my rock and my wings. I cannot thank him enough, or the universe enough, for having us across our paths. He is so trustworthy, steadfast, supportive, patient, encouraging. You couldn't find a more solid person than David Holland to have as a friend. And I know that, and I'm grateful. I can't imagine living through any of these last years without having him in my world.
And Barbara as well has been my rock. It's interesting that in some ways how we approach our art is almost diametrically opposed to each other, but we have an immense respect for what each other does. And I respect her. The first time that I went to your apartment and saw those drawings that you pulled out from under your bed, I was literally blown away. I just could not believe what I was seeing.
Those are those earlier dark drawings.
The emotional impact of those was just so profound and so immediate. And that's, the ultimate of art is to express something like that. So from the very minute that I saw those, I think we became kindred spirits right there, really, because I had the sense that I wanted to express things as well. But you've been such a benefit to me because you've been my rock. So whenever this kind of, art is this roller coaster, the art is this roller coaster ride.
Joyous and
it's like this is like.
And then COVID.
But the gallery situations go up and down, arts festivals go up and down, and your acceptance for your own work goes up and down, and your perception of your own validity as an artist goes up and down.
I think that's been our biggest help to each other, is because there are moments at this bottomless down, going, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. What I'm thinking, and the other person sees with clear eyes and says, this is what you are supposed to do. This is beautiful. And those are the times when you desperately need someone to pick you up, get you back, take them one step after the other. And I think we've been very fortunate in that most times we keep a balance. One's a little up, one's a little down, we mellow out. And even in the times when it's funnest when we're both up and excited. There are times, especially like a lot of this year, we've all been going through so much. but to be able to figuratively hold someone's hand and say, we're gonna get through this together, is priceless. And I think in some strange way, the fact that you don't get to keep too many friends is because we both moved around. We moved every year growing up. So we do not have lifelong friends, except each other. And how a friendship over that many years can go through so many of life's changes is a creation in itself, which I'm eternally grateful.
I don't think either of us would have had the amount of courage that we've had to pursue our careers had we not had each other.
Oh, heavens no.
As a background, because there are times when I literally wanted to give up art altogether.
Yes,
so
that's just ridiculous.
you pulled me back from that. And so, yeah.
So Donna, we really appreciate you recognizing this as a special thing. Like I said, we just kind of wanted this as a moment of culmination of 30 years and a lot of work that we could share with the community. And COVID interrupted the highest of our expectations for that, but you have managed to find ways like this Zoom, like paced, spaced out people to come to the meet and greet on Friday. You have found a way to keep this going, and I don't know that anybody else could have done it with the grace and ingenuity.
Thank you very much, but I promise you it's been a team effort, and we have a really exceptional team here at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame and Gaylord-Pickens Museum, and we are certainly happy to have had such nimble artists to work with us during this time. And so I just want to show one last pairing in the gallery that was particularly interesting to both of our artists here today. And you can see that kind of upward lifting and the love and support, I think, that and the influence that both of them.
May I say something about?
Sure.
Yeah, Donna's eyes saw the beautiful expansion of the uplifting lines. But for me, again, this piece, Hold the Thing with Feathers, again, is my tribute to the human spirit, because it's like we try to reach out for each other, as in the roots at the bottom. And no matter how many times our hearts get broken, we're still going to rise to hope again, spread our wings, and find another way to create life.
Move into that upper
Yes,
realm.
always, hope.
Exhibit in person. And please be sure to also check out the virtual exhibit so you can study some of these things closer if you want to stay safe at home. And Emma has kindly put that in the chat for you. So,
and we want to thank who's ever in the room with us for coming.
Really.
This is such a personal thing, and we don't get to talk to you or each other about a lot of this very often. So it's a joy. Thank you so much for making us feel welcome here.
We are so happy that you guys joined us today, and we hope to see you more virtually and in person. And I just want to remind you, at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, we tell Oklahoma's stories through its people. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame believes there are no limits to what is possible. Every day, we celebrate the legacy of inspiring Oklahomans with all generations, because Oklahomans are changing the world. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to our artists, and we wish you all health and happiness. Good night.